My name is Rebecca Blackwell, and I'm one of the very many visionary volunteers at Elm Street Cultural Arts Village. I'm joining you on Elm Stream today to introduce you to one of the good friends that I've met through my experience at Elm Street, and that is artist and nature lover and all-around wonderful person, Ann Litrel. Ann, welcome to Elm Stream online.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Ann's going to talk to us today about one of the things that she has learned to do and has shared with some of us. It's called nature journaling. And I got to participate in one of her workshops this last fall on nature journaling, and I just really loved it. So Ann, I'm really excited that you're going to share that with us today. It's really a fun way to engage in nature and arts. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the heck is nature journaling and how did you come to be involved in it and what do you like most about it?
Well, thanks. And thanks for mentioning the fall workshop. I had a blast. That was great. Nature journaling is something I learned when I was getting my Master Naturalist certification. We did that, a class and I did that in the Chattahoochee Nature Center with a fabulous teacher, Tom Howick, and he introduced us to this whole concept of nature journaling. It's really about getting outside and recording the experience that you're having while you're outside, with whether it's observing birds, wildlife, walking through the landscape. Nature journaling is a combination of drawing and science and experiencing nature. It's very simple to do. Just a few tools and anyone can do it. There's some definite techniques to use, and that's part of what he shared, and that's part of what I'll share today. So.
Wonderful. How do you get started if you're going to go do nature journaling? What do you do first?
The easiest thing to do is to go outside and start with something really simple. Walk around outside. It can be right outside in your yard, and find just a small object that can fit in your hand. Maybe a leaf or a stick or a rock, something that looks a little interesting to you. Go ahead and have a seat, and you've got a few simple supplies, a sketchbook and a pen, and that's where you begin.
So you don't need a lot of supplies, just paper and pencil or paper and pens?
That's right. That's right. When I'm leading a workshop, usually the first thing that we do in orientation is to kind of start to tune you up to quiet your mind and start to make observations. This is harder than you would think because most of us are used to this constant onslaught from our phones and computers. So the very first thing to do is, after you've picked your object, is to cycle through 5 deep breaths. I'll do this whenever I feel like my concentration is waning. Take the deep breaths and then start to follow the prompts of nature journaling. And those are 3. I notice, I wonder, and it reminds me of. So when I went outside this morning, for example, to do nature journaling, I noticed the hawk was crying up in the sky. I could hear him, but I couldn't see him. I started looking around on the ground, and I noticed my little resident lizard who lives in my front yard. He was out basking in the sun. You might notice the smell of a damp ground or a nearby flower blooming. These are things you might not notice, but this is really the beginning of the nature journal experience, is centering your mind and getting ready to pay attention to where you are.
Great. And you mentioned 3 prompts. So once you have your rock or whatever it is, you just follow those steps with those in hand?
Right. So there's a couple of tools you can use. We're really not used to doing this. One thing that's fun to use is a little jeweler's loop. You can get that for $6 or $7 on Amazon, or magnifying glass. You can even use your phone. I don't know if you have access to it, but there's an example of an opening exercise that I do with my students that is very eye-opening for most people who aren't artists. So anyone can do this. You don't have to be an artist. So I don't know if you can pull that up for us to look at.
I can.
All right.
I can. I think I can.
Right. So this little exercise really just takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and it's really a warm-up for people that don't consider themselves artists. As I said, you do not have to be an artist to do nature journaling. In the upper left, the very first exercise is simply to draw something. You've picked out your object, and now you're going to draw it. Very simple drawing. This is from a person that came to our workshop named Charna, and she had a wonderful experience with this exercise and does not consider herself an artist. So you can see her first very simple drawing on the left. After we did that, I encouraged them to pick up the magnifying glass or loupe or their phone and look at the object more closely. What Charna did was she looked at her stick and she suddenly started going, oh my gosh, there's a little spider here. Oh my gosh, there's all kinds of little bumps on this twig that I hadn't noticed. Wow, there's lichen growing on this stick. It was almost as though she was seeing for the first time. So after she did that, we did the exercise on the right, the top right. It's a contour drawing, where now that you've really looked closely at your object, you take your pen and without looking at the paper, you attempt to duplicate the edges, to sort of follow along mentally on the edges of your object and to draw on the paper what you are feeling. So you're following all those little bumps, and you can see how much more detail there is in the space of 5 minutes from her drawing on the left to the drawing on the right. She's suddenly seen and noticed all these little bumps in this object that she had never seen before. For some people, nature journaling is the first experience they've had of really looking closely at something, and it is an experience of being alive. It's wonderful. On the third drawing on the lower left, this is where Charna did what we call gesture drawings, and this is where you're really trying to acquaint yourself with the movement of the whole object. What is the whole shape? What is the motion? And you can do several different drawings all at once. You can do them on top of each other. This is just an exercise, and you can see she's drawn this motion of the stick on that lower left panel in 3 different ways. And then finally, on the lower right, you do a traditional nature journal entry with your little object. This is the same object. Charna's had this stick for all these 4 exercises, and she's drawing it in detail. She's noting little details in writing, and she's writing about it, and she's got a record of this whole experience. And in this case, she was thrilled with this exercise because of the progression from the upper left down to the lower right. This is the kind of experience of being truly alive and awake that you get from nature journaling every time, really.
Yeah, that's very cool. Can you show us an example of what a finished nature journal entry might look like?
Oh, sure. For this video, I did a little series of staged nature journals, like this right here. I don't know if you can see this in the camera. This is a nature journal entry that I did just a couple weeks ago. I was sitting outside and I suddenly noticed a blue jay diving into my tiny little pond in my backyard, and he was snatching beakfuls of moss and then flying off with them. And then right after he flew off, another came in, and I suddenly realized, oh, I am watching a pair of blue jays building a nest. They are harvesting this moss for a nest, and I watched them for about an hour. Here I'm drawing them quickly, and I'm drawing the way they were positioning themselves around the pond. Here's the little waterfall, And here's the different spots where they were harvesting. I noticed that and wanted to note that in the nature journal. Right here is something I would typically include on each page, which includes the weather, some notes about is it damp, what is the date, where am I drawing this, it's in my backyard. So this is kind of what a finished nature journal page would look like. After I was done drawing it outside, I came back in and I added the color. But this was really a record, a journal page of this wonderful, unique moment in time that just took place right in my backyard.
I understand you did an exercise this morning and kind of took some progressive pictures for us to see step by step how you go about doing it. Do you have a minute to talk about those?
I'd love to. If you can show the photos, I can show you the what I was drawing. It's a picture of a yellow flower in bloom. It's a native flower called the Coreopsis.
Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
And I have to start very back. Okay, there we go.
Yes, there you go. So there, the photo on the left is a large spreading patch of this native Coreopsis. It's a flower that I have in my backyard. It's a spring pollen source and also a host food for a couple different moths that are native to this area. So I sometimes see those moths in my backyard. They're a real pretty emerald green moth. Over on the right, you can see the flower itself, the Coreopsis flower. It's a very simple shape. It's almost like a flower you might draw when you're a kid, you know, with the little yellow middle and then the yellow petals. If you go to the next series of photos, I also took a snapshot so you could see on the left is the leaf shape. If you see the large leaf in the upper left, you can see at the base of it two tiny little leaflets. These are the mouse ears. This is called mouse-eared Coreopsis. Obviously saw this and thought it looked like a mouse, so the common name of this flower is mouse-eared Coreopsis. On the right is a picture I snapped very quickly with my phone when I was out sketching the Coreopsis. This was a little visitor that came and went to the Coreopsis. He was on it for a minute or two. Some kind of really beautiful little moth with orange patches on his shoulders. And so I snapped a picture because he didn't stay long enough for me to draw him. So anyway, this is what I was drawing today, and now I can show you sort of the stages of the nature journal entry. Thank you. On the screen there, what I started with were some notes in the upper left about where am I drawing, what is the date, what's the weather. It was fine, sunny, a cool morning. These kinds of notes can help you over the years. If you tend to record in the same place, you can compare dates like, oh, this year the monarchs came in the first week of August, but it was warmer 5 years later and they came much later, you know, that type of thing. Down in the bottom, you can see where I've started to draw the leaves. I started with the leaves of the Coreopsis because of the name, mouse-eared Coreopsis. So in the lower right, you can see that large leaf and then the two little leaflets at the base of it. So that was sort of where I started, recording the event and where it is. This is almost like a scientific entry, and then beginning to draw and observe the plant itself. So if you go to the next one, you can see where I went from there. I went ahead and I added the stem, and then I drew the flower head from the side, and I started making notes about the plant itself. After I got out the jeweler's loop, I noticed that in the head of the flower, there were tiny, tiny little spider webs, too small for me to barely see with my without the loop, and there was a little spider living there. This is the kind of discovery that you make when you're nature journaling, that there is a whole world and universe in something that you didn't notice at first. It reminds me of Horton Hears a Who. Whole little world in the flower that no one can see.
And I see you've done the I wonder prompt and the reminds me of prompt down here too.
I did. I noticed the flower web, I mean the spider web and the little spider, and then I began to wonder why does the plant have these two little leaflets? Does it have an evolutionary purpose, or is it simply random? These are the kinds of questions that scientists and biologists ask, and lots of times we've stopped asking questions about what we see. I know that for me, nature journaling reminds me to ask questions and to wonder, and it's helped me recapture that curiosity that I know that I had, and now I can remember I had as a child. Um, so that's one of the wonderful gifts of doing a nature
Mm.
journal. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm curious again. Things aren't boring. I'm actually really curious. So on the next stage, yes, you can see I've decided to also look more closely at the center of the flower. You can see that up at the top. And what just appeared to be a simple gold disc in the middle ended up to be a wonderfully complicated structure with little domes in the center of it, and then little fluffy things all around the edge of the center. I could see ridges in the petals. It was so much more complex than what it seemed at a distance, which was simply a yellow flower. Um, the Just a few weeks ago, I was outside in my yard with my 10-year-old neighbor, Vera, and we were looking at a different flower. And I can remember as we got in close to look at it, all of a sudden she got that look on her face. And we saw that there were tiny little caterpillars
Wow.
down in, and it was the host plant for this kind of butterfly. But we would not have seen that if she and I hadn't gone in to look closely at something.
Mm.
So this is the final stage. If I didn't take color with me in the field, sometimes I'll bring my sketchbook back and I'll go ahead and add color. Um, I will add a title, sometimes some arrows and little explanations. In this case, I added a picture of the moth, which I'd taken a snapshot of, and then I went to go ID it on some of the apps that I'll share that list with you later. But this is sort of the stage where where I tend to pull it together, add the color, and really make it shine it up as I guess, as a picture of a memory. The hour that I spent outside this morning and what I experienced and saw that I'd never seen before.
Mm. And I'll bet this really cements it into your memory too. It's almost, when you go back to look at this, it's almost takes you right back there on that day.
It does, and that's how it differs from taking photos. Nowadays, we're all outside taking photos all the time, snap, 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 and those become our memories, but it is not written into our memories in the same vivid way as if we spend time with it
Mm-hmm.
and we observe it. One of my nature journal teachers, he's written a book, is Jack Muir's Law, and he talks about the experience of nature journaling is like falling in love again.
Mm.
Finds love as sustained attention and interest. And he shared an experience of being in the Southwest in a particular area for a period of 3 years, and he was drawing all the birds and the animals and the plants that lived there. And he said by the end, he felt as though he was communicating with them. He would actually talk to the little plants as he was drawing them and acknowledge them. And when he got up, he would fluff up the grasses that he'd been sitting on. He said, truly, when we pay attention to something, that is a kind of a love.
Mm.
Um, and I can say as a parent and as someone who's done homeschooling that this kind of thing also for children is also being used more and more, because so much of the next generation doesn't have a good way to connect, with the nature that's around them. And
like you said, it combines imagination and science and art and really integrates all of those pieces of ourselves.
It really does. And for a child, it's as natural as breathing because we're born curious and integrated to nature, you know. It's it's what we it's what we're designed for.
Well, I'm going to stop the screen share here. And as we wrap up, tell me a little bit about, you said you might be able to leave us with some information on resources to go to and applications and that kind of thing for identification of plants and animals.
Yeah, I just consider this like a little introductory video. I would love to share with everybody. I'm hoping that attached to this is a way, there's a supply list, very simple supplies, some plant and insect ID apps to use, some books, and also sort of a little worksheet of prompts so that you can get started either with yourself or your children or a friend and go outside and have this rich experience of life that's just right outside our front doors. I love it every time I do it.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Ann. I've really enjoyed, and my life's been enriched by this, and I hope that our viewers are going to enjoy it as well. I really appreciate you sharing it with everyone.
Thanks, Rebecca. I really appreciate it.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.